What brilliant idea did I have when I proposed this film?
Today, we'll be breaking down Stanley Kramer's 1961 Judgement at Nuremberg. This film is a very important film in history, I believe. It was a fantastic film, personally. And it's a film that explores a very historic event, which was the Nuremberg trials, which, for those who don't know, it was a trial in Germany, and it basically held to account some German officials and Nazis for their crimes against humanity. And in this film in particular, it focuses on four prosecutors, who are held to account to answer for their crimes against humanity, their war crimes during the war. They have to explain why they did these things. They also have to answer to themselves, can they live with these things? The wider question, does Germany as a whole have to be accountable? Is everyone complicit? And what makes people complicit?
Obviously, as always, full spoilers ahead for those who don't want to be spoiled. What did we think?
I always say to people, whatever way you want to take it, like, this particular part of history is like one of my favorite parts of history.
That's fucked up.
No, I just find it extremely fascinating, and especially in terms of Nazi Germany, because there's a lot of context behind the birth of Nazi Germany. It was a perfect storm almost, with the Weimar Republic and Germany having someone who could really be for German nationalism and turn the country around. People think it's often black and white, because you look at Germany and you think, why wasn't this way? How could you let this happen? But then you have to look at the context and history behind it. And so for me, going into this film, I was intrigued. I didn't know what to expect. 3-hour-long film about the Nuremberg trials. I was like, well, okay, But for me, I thought, number one, in terms of subject matter, what we're exploring here, this is a film that really engages you in not only the historical events, but also the morality and the complexness of the situation in Nazi Germany. When you go into the craftsmanship of this film, a 3-hour-long film, predominantly set within the confines of the courtroom, and throughout the film you're thoroughly engaged. I'm glad you picked this film, and I would say definitely rewatch the film, and this is a film that goes up there for me.
Taskmaster, what'd you say?
My dad brought something up while I was watching it with him. The whole argument in the film is that even if they do find these prisoners guilty, is that they're going to probably be released anyway. They're really intelligent minds. If you look at something like the film Oppenheimer, a lot of them were German scientists. What happened with these scientists that were probably guilty of these heinous war crimes is that they ironically just helped the Americans anyway. And that is brought up in the film. It's brought up by the general when he's talking to Colonel Lawson. Towards the end, he's saying, what's going to happen tomorrow? Like, what are you going to do? I know you want to find these men guilty, but the reality is that there's a new war now, and that if we lose the popularity of Berlin, then we're going to lose. Ultimately, politics is getting in the way of this justice. The question is the pursuit of Dan Haywood, is it pointless in the end? He just wants justice. What is the point in him pursuing and finding these men guilty?
I think there's an answer to that, and I think that it's quite a complex one, and I think that this is why this film is so beautiful. There is the element of, okay, how the hell do you tell a compelling story in 2 hours with predominantly one location? This film does it in 3. And also, what kind of angles, camera-wise, do you adapt in order to keep the interest of people for up to 3 hours? Give me one reason why I should watch a 3-hour movie about the trial of Nuremberg, and to that I'll say, I'll give you 8. Spencer Tracy.
Preach it.
Burt Lancaster.
Come on, baby.
Richard Widmark.
Let's go.
Judy Garland.
Oh, man.
Montgomery Clift.
Oh, man.
Will Shatner.
Come on, man.
Marlene Dietrich.
Wow.
And Maximilian Schell. These like super powerful cast pieces that has since been popularized with the whodunits. Rian Johnson will do exactly the same thing, where he'll have 20 of the greatest actors in just one movie and just hash it out. I think that the first person to really make that a staple of a genre was Stanley Kramer, the director. Because if you look at his movies, they're like these insane ensemble pieces with literally the best actors of their generation, all in one, and they're hashing it out. I mean, this film knocked it out the park for me. I've seen it now, I think, 4 times, and it's shocking how, even on a 4th viewing, I'm still learning stuff. And one of the more compelling movies that I've ever seen in terms of just clarity with regards to the core meaning of the movie, what it's trying to say. We can start off with the script and the screenplay. So the film won 2 Oscars, one for screenplay, I believe, and the other one for the primary role, which was given to Max Schell. Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but 100% deserved.
One of the best monologues in cinema history.
One of the best monologues in cinema history, but at the same time, ultimately one of the best performances. Can you imagine being in the room with Burt Lancaster, Spencer Tracy, Judy Garland, Montgomery Clift, and you, Maximilian Schell, an actor that barely nobody knows from the mountains of Switzerland, completely manages to outshine every single one of people in the room. 100%. Actually, Montgomery Clift did deliver a phenomenal performance. I'll say this. The first thing that really stuck me with the script is how clear it is about its core philosophical theme.
Yes.
And the thesis of the film argues rational legality divorced from morality is the seed to atrocities. It's questioning our role within that. If the crimes, say, of the Nazi Party, who is meant to share that guilt? Is it the individual or is it the collective?
Yeah.
The law that was skewed morally, that was completely fucking heinous, that represented National Socialism. What it's saying is that that question is erroneous to begin with because the action of the collective is the compounded effect of multiple individuals
100%.
skewing their sense of morality to serve a higher cause, which in this particular case was the country, the nation. And how in the name of such causes, we're willing to bat a particular eye, and in the name of the collective, we're led inadvertently to creating abominable acts of the kind that reach genocidal levels, which is exactly what happened during the Holocaust.
Yeah, and it's when some fantastic points there. We need to unpick those, and it's when it's hidden behind that cloak of nationalism. There's all these mentions from it was for the great of the motherland, the fatherland.
That's right.
As they call it. You know, Germany. I was doing history. Will remember it in such a way, and so the question of the film that you just meant it's a difficult one when you really try and get your head around it. And throughout the film, my mind was going back and forth the whole way.
And it's quite a difficult theme. And the prosecutor in the particular film will essentially take the stand that it is up to every individual to stand up to evil. And the defense will take the angle of, no, it's the nation, it's the country, it's just citizens upholding the law.
Yeah.
But what is law worth if it is founded in injustice?
Yeah, exactly.
The trial essentially is the literal embodiment of that discourse.
Yeah.
The prosecutor's points were almost as good as the defense's points. So 2 things. First of all, if you're going to have a discourse in trial, that means that, okay, this is going to be quite literal. It's going to be quite verbose, which means you better step up your dialogue. And secondly, the difficulty in this particular film, if I were to be Abby Mann, how can I posit points that are as strong as the prosecution to make this film interesting? So I need to place myself as the advocate of the devil to make the best points in order to defend these Nazi judges. And he knocks it out the park. There are 3 incredible monologues in this movie, and I honestly think that the one that struck with me the most, Maximilian Schell's disturbing monologue on the universal responsibility of Nazism, really is the one that stuck with me the most, because Max Schell acted as this figure that just, hit all of these really uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
To this point, I must absolutely credit Abby Mann. What I love about the script is that he really sympathized with Burt Lancaster's role, Ernst Janning. What I love is that every single one of the characters in this movie are incredibly smart. One of the things that at least I really appreciate when I watch a movie is when I truly can see that the characters that are being presented to me are as smart as they should be on paper. Yeah. That really gratifies my experience as a viewer, because I'm like, okay, clearly I'm in the hand of a master and I'm about to get pure satisfaction from this movie. Obviously, we're presented with Judge Haywood, and Judge Haywood, who is the main character, is the moral axis of the movie. Yeah. And by being the moral axis of the movie, what happens is that you're not really leaving much space for an arc there. No. If you're not leaving place for an arc, then why the hell would I continue watching? Also, in particular, in the case of the Nuremberg trials, you're presenting these 4 judges. No one really fucking thinks that these guys are going to go free. We all know that they're going to be found guilty. Why would I care? And this is yet another problematic that man completely outsmarts which just shows me the brilliance of the script. The arc will not be shown necessarily through Haywood, but we're going to feel them a lot more through the characters of Ernst Janning and through the character of Richard Widmark. One will have a positive arc, whilst the other one will have a negative arc. I think that the most interesting arc in the entire movie actually happens to be Richard Widmark, a lot more than Ernst Janning, because obviously Ernst Janning, with his stoicism and him basically telling the unrelenting Nazi off, you're already giving me very strong signals that this dude is bound to crack at one point or another. However, Richard Widmark really was incredibly impassioned and emotionally shell-shocked by the horrors that he saw in the concentration camp. And so his negative transformation by the end of the movie hits. That is what's fantastic. Ernst Janning begins as this apathetic character. It starts off with him not even saying if he posits himself as guilty or non-guilty. He doesn't even speak. And Max Schell says that his client rejects this entire trial, which actually makes him even worse off than the Nazi
Emil Hahn.
Emil Hahn, because at least Emil Hahn is like, I'm a fucking Nazi, but I do respect the courtroom and I do respect the law, so I will follow along. And in the end, what Ernst Janning goes on to do is subvert the expectations of the law, go against the defense, and literally be a witness and basically incriminate himself by delivering an absolutely powerful speech. What I love about this entire film, Abbie Mann, and particularly Stanley Kramer. Stanley Kramer was incredibly politically engaged, and he was anti-McCarthyism during the 50s. This was like kind of like a black stain that was on his back, that he was a director that always had a message. And this film clearly had a massive message to tell. But I didn't find it to be preachy. I didn't find it to be preachy for the simple reason that it fit the bill. We are within the confines of justice. Justice is not only there to uphold the law, it's also there to supposedly uphold a higher moral law. So if you have a great judge, that judge is going to be touching onto that spiritual morality as opposed to just the basic law. And so because there was a dramatic reasoning behind it, I never found it to be preachy. And Stanley Kramer in the early 60s truly believed that he was witnessing what he calls the seeds of what allowed the Nazis to be in power to begin with. It's the minor infractions to liberty that lead to bigger crimes. Things never come in, as you said, black and white. It's through incremental changes and little privations of liberty that all of a sudden you find yourself so far gone that you're like, what the hell happened here? And what I love about the film, which I believe to be the stronger part of the script, if I may say, if I may have a reservations on this film, Mann always used the trial. It was center stage, but equally center stage was what was happening on the outside with the pressures of the American government to give lenient sentences to the 4 judges in order to have Western Germany as an ally during the Cold War. When you do that, what you're doing is you're now influencing justice. You're influencing something that is supposed to be absolutely pure. And that minor infraction is what leads to, for worse, a Hitler. Why I called it a negative transformation is that the man who stood up on the stand and gave an emboldened speech against the 4 judges, against the fact that these guys 100% knew what they were doing, and said that the worst of them all was Ernst Janning, because that man actually wrote and helped build the constitution of the Weimar Republic, and then went on to discredit it by being the Minister of Justice through Nazi. That man is the one who ultimately backpedals and does exactly what he is accusing the defendants of doing. Looks Judge Haywood in the eyes and says, quote, "But somewhere in the midst of these events, the responsibility of the crimes that we brought forward during this trial must be placed in true perspective. And this is the decision that faces your honors. It is the dilemma of our times." That, ladies and gentlemen, is how Mann says, I fucked up. It's so powerful when dealing with absolutes, and the one dude who's at the other extreme that represents righteousness ends up being the one that commits sin. And so when that occurs, bro, I just stood up and I applauded. And I was laying on my bed. This just tells you everything about the quality of the script. The people who are placing themselves as these morally superior people, in this particular case, the Americans, are the ones committing the same mistakes that these judges with high moral standards like Judge Janning made when the Nazis were slowly taken over. And that, to me, is outstanding. It's outstanding because the writer is taking a very staunch point of view that might get him in trouble, first of all. And I love that he's just not painting it in black and white. I believe when things are painted quite black and white, this is also where you might find the preachiness. In addition to the fact that you're not giving a dramatic reason to make this very emboldened, righteous speech, if behind it you're also presenting it as us versus them, then you're clearly feeling preachy. The ending for me is perfect. And it's perfect because it subverts my expectations all the way to the final frame of the movie. The one that already subverts it, which is the climax, is the judgment of Haywood. It reaches its zenith when everyone's there and all the fucking Americans are staring at Haywood like, you better freaking make these guys innocent. He is emboldened and gives this insane speech, sentences all of them to life in prison. You'd think maybe he might give him 5 or 10. No, life. The person who even on the stand as a witness said, I am guilty, no leniency towards him there. Then, as he's packing up, the resolution of the film is Ernst Janning, maybe Germany's greatest judge who wants to meet Judge Haywood. They finally meet. You now are expecting, okay, I've delivered the sentence, so now I can at least, through conversation, be lenient vis-a-vis Ernst Janning. And the guy gives him his case, and then Janning, essentially, the only person that deserves his full-on confession is Haywood. Janning is impressed by the fact that he could not be bullied into swaying the sentence because ultimately the things that judge stands up for are above everything else. That's where really like humanity shines, right? Yeah. Upholding higher moral standards and virtues, particularly when they are being attacked and resisting. He says, you have to believe me. I didn't know that it would come to these things. And Judge Haywood, he looks at him and he says, Janning, you knew the moment you sentenced that man, you knew to be innocent. What a remarkable ending. I really did not expect that. Even I thought, God damn, dude. But that just shows you the resolution is as intense, if not more intense, than the climax, which is insane. He comes down the stairs, this beautiful wide shot as he's walking down the corridor of prison. His shoulders are slumped. It almost looks like he's weeping. And then we get that motherfucking text that says, all of these dudes were released. None of them served their sentences. That almost like is disheartening. And it's a cynical point to end on because we've just seen this unbelievable, upstanding citizen. And all of that hard work is being broken by the pressure of politics. And so you're ending it on a massive warning towards us. What an emotional roller coaster. And this is just by the power of screenwriting.
Do you think Dan Haywood as a character would have been content knowing that he at least tried to pursue the right thing?
I believe so because he actually says it. When Maximilian Schell has that conversation with him and says, let's do the gentleman's wager. I believe that none of these guys will stay in prison and that they'll be released within 5 years. And Judge Haywood says, you are remarkably intelligent because what you say is very much logical. It is true. Yeah. Logically speaking, I believe that, and particularly with the current climate, they will be released. But again, that does not make it right. And as far as I'm concerned, today I did the right thing. What you do now is up to you. All I know is that I did my job right now and I'll continue resisting. And clearly he's given the idea of you may release them and I'll be on the front again resisting that release. He's very content. I mean, he's content. He's not content. He's horrified by just the violence that man is able to commit in the name of some...
Yeah. I think I found it particularly interesting, especially if we double back to Herr Rolfe's when he talks about complicity.
Yeah.
When he discusses, aren't we all complicit in this kind of thing? And then you kind of go and look at some of the points that were made by Haywood and that the questions that the film asks of us, such as how could you implement these laws as judges, or even forget that you're judges and let's strip it down to your people. How could you watch these things go past as just people as well as judges, you know? But if we look at the history in terms of the war against Nazi Germany, it started in 1939 and ended in sometime in 1945.
That's right.
It's interesting to see that American involvement didn't happen until 1941. And so in Herr Rolfe's kind of speech there's kind of an interesting point to kind of look at in terms of we're looking at these people and saying, because they did stand back, wherever it's Emil Hahn, whether it's, they enforced, but they also stood back. Part of them enforcing was standing back and letting this happen and enforcing the law and doing all these things. And then you have Judge Haywood. He represents America. That's who he represents, or the world, is whatever you want to call it.
I find that Widmark represents America a lot more, and I think that it's visually shown by the fact that he's always wearing the colonel's outfit. I believe that Judge Haywood really represents universal justice.
I agree with you in that sense, overtly speaking, but at the end of the day, if you want to have this is why I find this point interesting. If we want to have this thing and say, okay, whatever the conversation is about, are all Germans complicit, or is it self-preservation? Then we look at America as a country who stood back. Now you have Judge Haywood, he's representing this moral divinity, shall I say, whereas he's trying to, and it's shown in his actions, because he doesn't sway when the colonels and trying, but it's something difficult to separate, because in Nazi Germany, if I'm trying to get my point across well, in Nazi Germany, we can't separate the German from Nazism, but here we can separate the judge from his own nationalism, in which there was a period where they stood back and the war was continued, and the things that were implemented by these prosecutors happened, and the law and system he represents is an American system. Can we separate Judge Haywood from that? From this idea that he represents this system that is America, that went a few years without stepping in to the destruction that was going on within Nazi Germany?
I think that absolutely. I don't know about him representing, again, American justice system, because even when he's issuing the sentence, he actually says that this is right for many, if not all, of the Western civilized countries. So he represents justice as represented by the West. He who takes the weapon to murder someone, or he who helps the other get a weapon to murder someone, is by de facto guilty. So for me, he represents the West, not necessarily America. The question that you were asking was, are Americans complicit in the horrors of Nazi Germany? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Because the reason why I say that is because if we can kind of say, if we look back to Herr Rolfe and his point of this kind of, he goes on this crazy run,
which is incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about American complicity. First of all, the fact that all of the main news articles actively hid the facts of the Holocaust in order to stay uninterested and away from the horrors that were happening in Europe. So there's complicity there. I think that Judge Haywood says that there is truth to the fact that there is complicitness. But even then, that's completely, totally besides the point.
Yeah.
Because Herr Rolfe's position is wrong to begin with.
Yeah.
Because Herr Rolfe's position is, yeah, but he did it too.
Yeah.
What I love about it is Herr Rolfe isn't right, but he is right in showing the hypocrisy of the world.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Nail on the head.
Rolfe for me wasn't the paragon of virtue in any way, shape, or form. It was a dude who really wanted to win the case.
Yeah.
And he even says he sees it as a game.
Yeah.
When he's speaking to Herr Janning and he's saying, what the fuck are you trying to do here? Why'd you go against me in trial? I'm trying to win this thing, you know? And if not for you, what I'm trying to do is I want the German to maintain some shred of dignity.
Yeah.
And Herr Janning just is not moving. He's an immovable force. And at this point he says, what do I need to show you? Do you want me to show you the images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yeah.
Is that their superior morality?
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that is what Haywood says on that point. You're right.
Yeah.
And this is why I think Haywood, that's what he brings forward in the script. Is he right in saying there's total complicity? I don't think so. And secondly, even if he were, that still does not excuse the actions of his defendants.
On that point, what you said there, like essentially these guys are on trial for the crimes they committed, not for what he committed.
Yeah,
There's
and
like, even if we're going to bring the argument of total complicity, this is not what the trial is trying to ascertain.
what I love is like Rolfe sees the entity as like a living, breathing thing. But the thing is, the entity is nothing without its individual, which is what Haywood is always trying to like bring it back to. And this is where, like, for me, I see no faults in the speech of Haywood at the end of it. To me, that is like the perfect conclusion to that philosophical problem.
Okay.
Everyone had like such a very well and layered role to play in the discourse. Even in the four defendants, you have the unrepenting Nazi. The second is the opportunist. The third, I guess, is repentant. Because, you know, he sleeps crying on his Bible, as he says, and when he's meant to say, do you have any final words, he weeps. And then the fourth is Janning, and Janning represents just pure intellect, pure conscience, and ends up confessing. Already these four archetypes. And then the script is wonderfully structured. It's very classical. The inciting incident, the turning point from 1 to 2 when the trial begins, the midpoint when Judy Garland finally steps forward and might be the turning point of the case. Not that there was really a turning point, like I said. I will say the two reservations that I have is the Marlene Dietrich character. I never felt that she had any kind of sway on Spencer Tracy. And the same thing with regards to the Russian threat. It's something that is said, that is presented with billboards, but the pressure is not to the point that I'm thinking, oh my God, really, maybe he might just go ahead and turn it around. Judge Haywood never bends towards any of the advances by the Americans with regards to giving a lenient sentence. But in the script, you really don't know. You don't know. He is the moral axis. In the end, he does the right thing, but there is a lot more suspense and tension leading up to it that I didn't necessarily feel. I thought the movie was, no, this guy is definitely sentencing all of these guys to life, and I'm sure that he's going to do the right thing. And the reason for that is because Stanley Kramer never once gave me the doubt. If you look at every single time people are coming up to him and saying, hey, you know about these American situation, he always does the same thing. He's fumbling with his hands, which shows that something is unnerving him. He like furrows his brow and he almost like loses eye contact. And every once in a while when someone will be too explicit with their demand, like, could you potentially, you know, do this directly? He stares at him and he just gives him this look like, bro, did you just ask me that? Not once did I feel that someone managed to tap into him and maybe, oh, okay. Never. Every single time, he doesn't budge. Colonel Lawson at the party when he's too drunk, he's like, I don't speak about the case. Marlene Dietrich, when she's serving the coffee, he says, I don't speak about the case.
There was one moment where I thought she almost got through to him, and it's when they're in that bar. There's that guy singing in that bar that they're in, and she basically says to him, it might just be better to forget. And the camera like spins around and it shows the people singing and dancing, and with the cuts to her face and his face, it goes back and forth, and you kind of see this intensity in his eyes, and you're kind of thinking in that moment, oh, maybe she has got through to him.
I agree with you on that one. And it just goes to show you not only the power of Marlene Dietrich's gaze, which is one of the most powerful gazes in the history of cinema, but also the power of music and the power of hope.
Yeah.
Because that chant right there is really a chant of hope. It's a chant of the pride of the German people. And it really hit me. None of the Germans are portrayed in an evil manner throughout the movie. Like there is no monster. They're all just regular folk. There is the blind dude there, and they seem to be like quite communal, helping one another.
That's it.
And this is what I really, really love, because it's, again, that's backdrop that millions of Jews were exterminated. I want to read a couple of quotes.
Yeah.
Because I want to get back to my man Mann, who, as far as I'm concerned, maybe wrote one of the greatest courtroom dramas of all time. Yeah. Arguably the greatest. Judge Dan Haywood. Janning, to be sure, is a tragic figure. We believe he loathed the evil he did. But compassion for the present torture of his soul must not beget forgetfulness of the torture and death of millions by the government of which he was a part. Janning's record and his fate illuminate the most shattering truth that has emerged from this trial. If he and the other defendants were all depraved perverts, if the leaders of the Third Reich were sadistic monsters and maniacs. These events would have no more moral significance than an earthquake or other natural catastrophes. But this trial has shown that under the stress of a national crisis, men, even able and extraordinary men, can delude themselves into the commission of crimes and atrocities so vast and heinous as to stagger the imagination. No one who has sat through this trial can ever forget the sterilization of men because of their political beliefs, the murder of children, how easily that can happen. There are those in our country today, too, who speak of the protection of the country, of survival. The answer to that is, survival as what? A country is not a rock. It isn't an extension of one's self. It's what it stands for. When standing for something is the most difficult. Before the people of the world, let it now be noted, in our decision here, that this is what we stand for: justice, truth, and the value of a single human being. Still we rise. So before we move to directing, I actually did think that a great exercise in storytelling, and I would love to leave your comments, say why you disagree with this. So we all three of us watched the 2000 version of Nuremberg, starring Alec Baldwin and Brian Cox. And while it wasn't a bad movie necessarily, it just was nowhere near as good as this film.
Fuck off.
And I think that the reason for the lack in quality already stems from a dramatic standpoint. So Mann not only discussed this issue as a preface to the script, but he also explicitly states it again in the closing speech by Dan Haywood. So he says, quote, "The Goerings, the Streichers, the Himmlers, the Eichmanns would inevitably end in a study of psychopathic sexualis. But the second group, these men who had been the bulwark of the most enlightened culture of Europe, how could they have gone along? And if they had, what was their responsibility? Finally, a glimmering of understanding that the very philosophy that enabled the Nazis to come to power was not unrelated to the motive of their being released set the groundwork for my premise." And he doubles down on that same argument when he has Judge Haywood say the words, "If this were a trial of degenerates and monsters, there would be no doubt and there would be no need for a trial to begin with. But what is shocking and what is so disconcerting is that these actions were committed by extraordinary men." Right then and there, I find the reason why Judgment at Nuremberg is so much superior than Nuremberg. And the reason for that is because we're not talking about Hermann Goering. So in Nuremberg, there already was a massive dramatic problem. A, there was no defense. The defense was literally the defendant himself, Hermann Goering, who basically had he called it a W.
We high fives with the
it wasn't even
Nazis.
a W.
I was like,
So already, you've just given dramatic leverage to Alec Baldwin's character. Brian Cox is not going to fucking outsmart Alec Baldwin, who happens to be this genius appointed by Franklin D. Roosevelt. And of course, right there, you've got a Soviet judge with an American judge, with the lead judge being English. This is going to be a massive humiliation ritual for, a 3-hour-long period. So the ball is in the court of my main hero. Where's the drama? Am I supposed to be rooting for the underdog here? The underdog being Hermann Goering?
I think... I literally think they tried to do that with that.
Yeah, they almost do
First,
that.
First courtroom scene, and Alec Baldwin's going back like, I think I'm going to leave the case and all that stuff. I think they tried to bring that in, but it's like I still at that point did not feel anything because I was like, it's Hermann Goering.
Bullshit. No, but
it's
also
Goering.
it's bullshit when he says, I think I'm going to
lose the case.
Bro, you're like, how are you going to lose the case? Have you been following your own case?
Yeah.
Bro, you've got this in the bag.
Yeah.
And so now I'm bored.
Yeah.
I'm bored because I'm like, okay, I really don't care. And I love that they tried humanizing Hermann Goering. I'm like, okay, cool, bro. You want to go that way? Go for it. I respect that as a screenwriter because it takes balls to do that, and let's go. Yeah. And you know why it takes balls? Because guess what? Joker did it, and over $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's your obligation as an artist to push the buttons and to draw the line. And also, your Hermann Goerings couldn't get to a situation of power without a human side to them. It's
course.
through their wits and their charms that they managed to
Yeah.
get where they were getting.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that it's really smart to do that, because if we are seduced into actually enjoying and appreciating Hermann Goering in this particular movie, then kudos to the screenwriter.
They even mention it in the script, because Speer, one of the colonels, goes to speak to Speer, and he says, how has he got the favour of the other prisoners? All he's speaking in platitudes. And the guy goes, that's how Nazi Germany got the favour of the German people.
That's right.
By speaking in platitudes. It's kind of mentioned in that sense.
But the thing is, the film doesn't hit nearly as hard for the simple reason that we're talking about the King's Round Table of the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the common people.
Yeah.
You're giving a lot of credence and power to this monster monolithic figure that is Goering and your Hitlers.
Yeah.
Bro, these two assholes wouldn't have been nowhere
If it
without
wasn't for
these four
people,
judges.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's about these four dudes closing a blind eye in order to satiate an insecurity that they're feeling in this particular moment, which is a lost sense of national pride after the World War I. That's what allowed 6 million Jews to be exterminated.
This thing with being these people actually being judges. Like some people today, you talk to some people today, there's stuff going on in the world, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't involve myself in politics. I don't concern myself in politics." And it's even that kind of attitude that, you know, okay, we see these four ordinary judges who are implementing it. So if these four talented men who are separated from a Goring can implement it, then we look even below at the people who are living. I'm sure those people in Nazi Germany said, "Oh, I don't involve myself in politics. I'm just, you know, gonna live normal life." Then that is the perfect storm for what eventually did happen. Then it scares me more than Nuremberg when I'm just seeing Goring, this evil person.
That's right.
You know what
That's
I'm saying?
right. And what I love is that he's also showing both, because here you showed one half of that.
Yeah.
So there's the one half who says, I don't involve myself with politics,
Yeah.
that allows that to happen.
Yeah.
And those are the servants in this particular movie. The two that said, oh, we don't involve
Yeah.
ourselves with
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah.
And we didn't know. Oh, you didn't know about Dachau, which
Yeah.
was like, you know, a
Yeah.
couple of
Oh, no,
miles
no,
out.
no, no.
Oh, no, we didn't know
we
about
didn't
that.
know.
And, you know, obviously Haywood delivers that unbelievable line. He's like, you know, I have the impression nobody knew in this entire fucking country.
Yeah.
And then you have the second people who actually know, and they are accepting a little bit of crime, but in order to turn everything around. But the problem is, man, when you create a little bit of crime, now that's just it. You've opened Pandora's box. All of the facets of how people react, like you just presented one, he just showed you how both of them can lead to that.
Yeah.
In the other one, like, they're presenting it as like, oh, Nuremberg, it's like this David versus Goliath. And I'm like, is Goliath Alec Baldwin?
Yeah.
Because clearly in this story, David is Goering, bro. And David loses.
Even the way he was like compared to Herr Rolfe and like Colonel Lawson, like Alec Baldwin delivering his like arguments. I was like,
but I already wanted to show you just from the blueprint. We don't even need to dive deep.
Yeah.
We haven't discussed dialogue. We haven't discussed character motivations. We haven't discussed the fact that Alec Baldwin fucks his secretary. We didn't discuss all that. Just the premise is already far less interesting with Nuremberg. I remember when I read the premise and when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, how are you going to be able to hold my attention for 3 hours? And I really wanted to watch that film. Do you guys want to know why I wanted to watch that? I wanted to watch it for the defense. I was like, yo, I just want to see how the defense will defend
Hermann
Goering. I was like, that right, I would watch that film just for the defense. Just seeing the defense going, Your Honor, I am fucked. And lo and behold, there was no defense. In Nuremberg, it's fantastic because the scenes that are outside are always there to supplement what's happening within the courtroom.
Exactly.
Which is A, intelligence. It's Judge Haywood essentially taking as much intel as he can on the German people in Nuremberg, trying to understand the customs, trying to visit the monuments. And every time he speaks to the German people, goes straight to, so how was life under Nazism? How did you manage to get by it? How did you manage to close a blind eye to all of these horrors? Exactly. The servants, but he also asked the same question with Marlene Dietrich. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, a really, really interesting pickup lines that you're given here, man. You know. And then obviously the second half is a lot more about Americans putting pressure on Judge Haywood.
Yeah, it is,
In Nuremberg, dude, it's a soap opera, forced romance.
Scrap that first hour, bro. It took us an hour to even get into the courtroom.
Oh, dude,
And the beauty of Judgment at Nuremberg was the obviously the courtroom. It's that back and forth. It really
well, you're
sucks
thrown
you
right
in.
into it as well.
We're thrown right into
we're,
it.
like I think it's
Yeah.
like what at like the 4th minute mark, we're already like
Ready,
all stand.
Yeah,
you know,
we're
you're like,
there.
what?
We're there.
That's it. And you know what it is, Rory? I think that the screenwriter is like, okay, I really, really, really need to infuse this thing with some form of drama, because clearly the main thing,
fill in the blanks. Yeah,
a humiliation ritual is fine, but it's at the end of the day undramatic, because what you just did is you overpowered your hero. Oh, Luke Skywalker can just kill Darth Vader with one hit? Why the hell am I going to watch it? Sure,
bro, and it's like, bro,
the world building is great, but why do I want to watch it? That's boring.
These Nazis are going, yeah, high five. Bro, these guys know they're getting hanged.
100%.
They know they're getting hung.
100%.
Like, they know they're getting hung. And like,
the people who didn't get the news never got any kind of screen time.
No,
I couldn't give 2 flying fucks about them. I didn't even know they were in there in the beginning. So that's just from a screenwriting perspective. So what'd you guys think of the directing?
I think you mentioned it, maybe not a few weeks ago when we were going to do this film, but a while back when you said this was one of the best directed films in a confined space. And, you know, watching 12 Angry Men, you kind of think, oh, can someone, you know, do it on par or better than that? And I was blown away. And to be fair, this is a film that's on Martin Scorsese's must-watch.
Is it?
Films list. Yeah.
I did not even know that.
I didn't know that.
There's a scribbling that he's got. I didn't know this until I looked at the thing again the other day, and it's on Martin Scorsese's films you should watch, you know. And this film is on it.
That really tells you everything.
Yeah. And for me, it was like, how do you get inventive with the angles in this confined space? But how else do you kind of heighten this directing, you know? Some of the really quick push-ins on Herr Rolfe, I felt like it was really pushing towards his passion and his franticness and his will just to keep going. Earlier on in the film, you have a shot and it's looking up at Ernst Janning, and then later on in the film when he begins to change, it's kind of the shot's looking down on Ernst Janning. And I think many times throughout the film, you have these instances of how the camera is representing each character in that particular moment. And for me, it was like, okay, yeah, this is serious. And so it's a big lesson. You can be inventive wherever you are, whatever setting you have. The camera can serve the story and enforce the story, and also enforce the themes and emotions of the characters.
Great. I totally agree. This is one of the things that really struck me. Historically speaking, Stanley Kramer, the people who really uphold his legacy are the filmmakers. Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, I think is a very, very good sign that you're a great filmmaker. But interestingly enough, the reviewers of the time were really, really harsh on Stanley Kramer. They said that he was more of a producer than he was a director. Yeah. As a director, he was a man without a style. It really fucking triggered me, because this man's directing was quite sophisticated, I found, in Judgment at Nuremberg. I felt like it was a mise-en-scène that worked with very intricate systems. Yeah. For example, the circular motions, right? The circular dollies that would occur during the speeches. When the prosecutor and the defense attorney made their speech, the camera would always tilt towards the judges, because ultimately they are trying to sway the judges. The only one who actually gets more time with the defendant is Maximilian Schell. The people on the witness stand, on the other hand, it would start on their face and turn towards the opposing judges, the defendants. Just that yin and yang game visually was just brilliant. And every witness, it would end on a different judge that was basically the subject of the testimony. And he just sticks to those rules. So then you might say, well, then if he does it all the time, doesn't it become predictable and boring? Well, no, because the person given the testimony or the prosecutor, their body language will change. And so then it's, how will the characters react within these very strict cinematic conventions that were laid out by Stanley Kramer? And that reveals character. The most striking one is every single one of the witnesses, with the exception of actually Montgomery or Clift, which is an interesting choice on its own, they all had, it was almost like a walk of shame, where they would walk past the defendants, all four of the judges. And the first one to pass was the old man, who essentially is used to expose the brilliance of Janning's character. He passes, he stops in front of Ernst Janning, but Ernst Janning doesn't move. When the old lady comes to talk about Judy Garland's character, when she moves, Ernst Janning doesn't move. However, when Judy Garland passes in front of Ernst Janning turns around. And so right then and there, Judy Garland repeating the exact same action serves a dramatic punchline that will reveal to the camera the spark in the eyes of Burt Lancaster, and we're going, oh, shit's about to go down. It's that much more striking because all of the previous times, he didn't move. And that's why these systems actually really are interesting, because they allow the character to express himself more. Why? Because you didn't show me 20 different angles. Because each angle, remember, the angles are supposed to serve the story. So every time you change to a new angle, I'm supposed to be learning something new. In this particular case, he goes, no, it's exactly the same dramatic beat, so I'm going to stick to that same angle. But the slight shifts in the character's posture and stuff is going to reveal visually more about the characters. For example, also, he chooses the same medium wide shot just below the eye line every time the witnesses are on the stand. It's a boring shot. There is no like depth or anything. It's one subject. It's kind of like claustrophobic in nature. So why am I completely invested? It's not only for the information that's being shown, but it's also with how the actors will interact within this very liminal space. The old man, for example, he's got his little cane. He feels comfortable, but when he feels uncomfortable, he starts fiddling around with his cane. He taps it and he breaks eye contact and he looks down. He feels ashamed. Montgomery Clift comes in when he's comfortable. He's looking straight ahead. And when he feels uncomfortable, he literally feels suffocated in the space that, if you notice, he's pushing the walls of this little stand. He's trying almost to break free from it. And his suit and tie are like closing in on him and he can't even breathe. And Judy Garland, obviously, when she makes her rapture, when Schell pushes her to the brink, well, she starts shaking everything and literally the stand starts bumping up and down, up and down, up and down. These slight changes in reactions, it stuck out to me because Stanley Kramer was like, I'm going to select this one angle that shows you exactly what you need to know about the drama, and I'm going to complete it with acting. I'm going to let the actors do their thing. And that right there is so much more powerful than showing me 10 different angles and then just cutting from one end to the next. When you do that, suddenly the director doesn't have a point of view. Suddenly the angles don't have as much dramatic weight. And so what happens now is you're relying on the dialogue, whereas here, bro, it's one angle, do your thing. What really bothers me is that by doing that, Stanley Kramer is doing exactly what a director must do, which is selecting the angles that are just necessary to tell the scene in the best possible way, without any kind of flash. The flashiness of this film are the zooms on the various actors every time but even then, every single one of the zooms, they mean something. My favorite zoom is the very first one where we switch from German to English. The first time there's a zoom is to actually tell the audience, okay, basically all the German speakers are going to speak English from now on, which I thought is brilliant. And the camera is always motivated. Every single one of the camera movements are motivated. Stanley Kramer is really someone who loves his actors and he trusts them to really, really amp up the ante in this one particular angle, says exactly what it needs to say without any kind of glitz. Alexander McKendrick, in his book on filmmaking, said something to the extent of, it's funny how every time he wants to hypothetically direct a scene, he goes straight to, how can I do this in one take? Which I think says a lot about him as a director, and he is a classical filmmaker, but what he's trying to say is there a way not to just overly rely on cutting and close-ups as an emotional vehicle? Is there a way that I can use space? Is there a way that I can use the character within that space, props, to say something about the characters? And I don't know if you guys noticed, but Stanley Kramer in this entire film made scenes, whole scenes, with one shot. And my favorite scene in terms of directing, it's the scene where Burt Lancaster is watering his rose in the prison courtyard. That entire scene is done in one shot. So there are 5 beats to the shot. It starts off from the perspective of Yanning, crouching, watering his rose. One of the judges speaks to him. He avoids whatever bullshit that other judge is saying, Han. He turns behind the tree, goes to the other side, waters it. Han comes closer to him this time. And interestingly enough as well, just in terms of just quality of blocking, one of the judges actually turns his head just to be sure that he's still in shot. So there's also depth to that shot. There are 3 layers. There's the foreground with Burt, the middle ground with Han, and the third one with the Bible-crying judge. Burt Lancaster stands up again, and now they're eye to eye, with Burt slightly taller than the other one, so he's reasserting power. That's position number 3. Then Bert finally, he turns towards the camera, and then Han's like, you can't escape me. And he's trying to escape him by coming closer to the camera. And he goes, because ultimately you're just a German. All of the dynamics and every single one of the dramatic beats of that one scene have been laid out by 5 different angles, all shot in one shot. And they were all brought forward by the very meticulous blocking of his characters within the scene. That's the sign of a real director. And he does it as well, the same thing. Just notice how Haywood is being presented to his servants. He uses depth. He uses multiple layering. He's speaking to William Shatner's character and the other dude who I forget who he is.
Guy talks like that to an old man really ought to get stepped on,
And he's talking about how much space there is. Honestly, I could have counted maybe like 1, 2, 3, 6 different positions of the actors. It goes, from 2 characters to 3 characters. Shatner leaves back to 2. It's just unbelievable stuff. All of the dynamics of that conversation are being played out by the interposition of the characters, where they are in depth and where they are within the frame. Also, he even has an added element that's really playful, and it's even his cuts. He has a fantastic sense of cutting. Yeah. Where people often talk about David Lean and all of his creative cuts, there's a lot of video essays that you'll find of, look at all these playful cuts that David Lean had in his movies. David Lean is a master. Do not get me wrong. I adore David Lean. But Stanley Kramer held his own as far as creative cuts. For example, when he goes, "You are just a German" at the end of the day, we cut to dramatic music and a piano as an exclamation point to Han insulting Yanning as a German. It's a phonetic cut. Yeah. There's another one where the scene where they're starting to bang the beers on the table, singing rejoicingly together. We cut to the judge banging his gavel, calling for order in the courtroom. When Marlene Dietrich invites Judge Haywood in her apartment and asks, "Do you want more coffee?" And she's just about to serve. We cut to Colonel Lawson pouring a cup of coffee at 12 at night. Yeah. At the end of it, when he says, "Is there anything that I can say to convince you?" Yeah. He says, "Nothing. There's nothing you can say to convince me." We cut to the radio man saying, "Nothing so far to tell, blah, 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 blah." And then we zoom wide to reveal the Americans listening to the radio and the advance of the Soviets in Berlin. There's still another 2 scenes that I could tell you about that just shows the sophistication in the mise-en-scène. The first one that really, really, really stuck with me. Marlene Dietrich speaking to Judge Haywood. We see the planches on the right side of the frame, and sticking up on the wall is the painting. It's as if he's physically there, looking down at Judge Haywood and at this entire situation. And the moment Marlene Dietrich sees that he doesn't want to throw her a bone, she stands up, she walks towards the left side of the frame. He's on the right hand side, and she now begins to speak about her husband. Now her husband is in the middle of the frame. He's literally the center of attention, just like the center of the discourse. And he says, "I can't see, I don't know." Visually, he cannot see because he's not turned towards their direction. The angle is physically showing you that entire drama. That's unbelievable directing, guys. And he does it in one scene. And then another one, when we finally are presented with Judy Garland's character, Judy Garland is presented to us in the dark, and she's also looking away. We pull back from a close-up, mid-close-up, to the person speaking who's her husband, and Colonel Lawson trying to convince the husband to get Judy Garland's character to testify. And Irene Hoffman stays in the dark. These two are in the light. And purely through cinematography, he already tells us that Irene Hoffman will do the right thing because she steps into the light. There's this thing that classical Hollywood used to do, which breaks reality to a certain extent. The husband turns around and points towards the camera so that we can see his reaction whilst she's having to deal with this conundrum in her head. And so it's visually striking because I get to see all 3 reactions back to back because the 2 are pointed to the camera and the husband's pointed, which is unnatural because in a real life situation you would turn. Yeah. Because there's no reason other than style for the husband to be looking away from the 2. You'd be like, "Oh, he's disappointed." Motherfucker, you're disappointed. I don't know what kind of... Since when... Have you ever been in a fight with your girlfriend or your wife? Do you look somewhere else when you're disappointed? Hell no, man. You're staring at her in the eyes what are you talking about? Yeah. But this guy would have you believe, no, I turn away and I let her say all her bullshit. But there you go. That's style right there. And that style, what it does do, it completely is there to heighten the drama visually for me because I get to see 2 reactions back to back. And what does she do? She turns to Widmark, to Colonel Lawson, which tells us, okay, she made the decision to go with, and then she hugs her husband. Because, I mean, actually, if you think about it, it is kind of wild, bro. She's like, husband, I'm going to testify to defend my real lover, which isn't you, a 35-year-old man,
family friend, bro.
35-year-old man who was getting with me when I was 16.
No, it's a family friend.
Was it really anti-Semitism, bro? Or was he just a pedo? I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. That's the only case where Yanning was the judge. Yanning saw past the anti-Semitism. He's like, what the fuck are you doing with a 16-year-old, bro?
Yeah. That was the only one that was justified.
You sit on his lap? You sit on his lap? A family friend? You kiss him? Did you kiss him once? Twice? 3 times?
Yeah.
Anyways, then it just happens to be a question of like, which style you could prefer a style over another. That's fine. But the one thing you cannot say is that this man didn't think his mise-en-scène, because clearly he did. Because where you see Judy Garland's character coming in, you see the reflection of Han in profile.
Yeah.
And she walks in from the right side, and on the left side, you have the reaction of Han. Han, who obviously is the enemy of Judy Garland. And I thought that's maybe one of the most beautiful shots of the entire film. And what reflections kind of tell you about the film? Because when the character of the defense attorney is speaking with Yanning, it's a very simple shot reverse shot with a glass separating them, right? You think to yourself, well, because the space is so confined, there isn't really much that you can do other than a shot reverse shot with editing. Really, the scene is going to blossom through the writing and through the performance of the actor. And yet, Stanley Kramer manages to find that one detail that adds so much layer to this one particular shot reverse shot, which is very simple. You guys ready for the trick? Yeah. When Schell speaks, there's the reflection of Burt Lancaster on his face, almost like a looming shadow, almost as if the defense attorney is now the inheritor of what Ernst Janning once represented. But when you cut to Burt Lancaster, there's no reflection on the glass, just Burt Lancaster. There is no impact, and Schell has no influence over him. And it's just that little visual motif that is so unbelievably telling that elevates this simple shot reverse shot to pure artistry. I think that a great place really to show the power of Stanley Kramer is just to compare 2 scenes. The prosecution scene, so the opening speech from the prosecution in Judgment at Nuremberg and Nuremberg from the 2000 sequence. In Judgment at Nuremberg, we start off with close-up of the prosecutor and his assistant. They're discussing. Then he stands up. We go to a mid-close-up. Boom. We have the speech of the prosecutor. We're faced with the prosecutor. There's the infamous circular motion towards the judges. Then we get this magnificently framed shot that shows the 4 defendants, all of them clear to the eyes, and in the background there's the translator who's working hard. We cut back to the prosecutor. The circular motion now takes so that the camera is just in front of him, and as he's pointing out the various crimes that they've been accused of, for each crime we cut to one of the judges, and it's just magnificently written that there are 4 cuts for each, with a bit more weight added on the 4th. We end on like this really angry close-up of the prosecutor, and that's really it. Yeah. Other than the cuts that are completely used to underline the various crimes that these guys have been accused of, the whole sequence is pretty much like a one shot. Yeah. And then you cut and you look at the same prosecution scene from Nuremberg. The whole speech is completely chopped up in the same kind of reactions. These reactions are all underlined by being below the eye line and all having their own zoom-ins. Honestly, I must have counted at least 4 or 5 of these freaking reactions. It's as if the director had only one trick under his sleeve, which is, I saw this in one of the Spielberg movies, so maybe we should do this. And so what happens as well is that the oomph of Alec Baldwin's speech really is undercut, and the irony of it. It's undercut by the overcut. Yeah. I think another thing that really stuck out about this film, obviously, is the performances. Yeah. To put it into context, this was a big deal in 1961 because Montgomery, Clift, and Judy Garland were not in the right headspace. They were, put it simply, they were alcoholics, and they were dealing with pretty big health issues at the time. And this was basically their comeback. And so we had like 2 massive comebacks in one film. Montgomery Clift, how he was playing with his hands, how he does this thing where, around this shot, just how he played with his eyebrows. They say that 2 best actors of the 60s were Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift, and that Marlon Brando became better because Montgomery Clift existed. And you can really tell because Montgomery Clift in a 3-hour movie is there for, all in all, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And he completely steals the show.
Yeah.
Same thing with Judy Garland. What do you guys think of Judy?
When I saw that she was gonna be in it, I thought she was gonna be in it for a lot longer than her actual screen time that she did have.
Yeah.
But like you said, in that instance, man, it doesn't even feel like you're trying to even steal the show. She just is being, you know, and a smaller character, but quite complex in terms of the story, to be fair.
Yeah.
And it was a stacked cast as well, to be fair. Like everyone, I can't fault any performance. It was stacked. The performances in Nuremberg didn't excite me in as much as the performances in Judgment at Nuremberg.
I found that Alec Baldwin's performance in that film was a lot staler than Maximilian Schell's performance. Yeah. Schell is super striking. He's giving it his all. It's a purely physical performance that's been heightened by his hair. His hair is acting just as much as himself, because as the film goes on, if you look at his hair is getting more and more disheveled. And after the sequence that is very shocking, the film of the Holocaust, the next day he comes up and he's got like massive bags under his eyes. So that tells you, okay, not only the impact of the film, but then him thinking, okay, how the hell am I going to gain the favor of the audience? And I completely believe it.
The one main thing that struck out to me about Nuremberg that I did think was good, actually, was Brian Cox looks in the close-ups. He really captured the look of evil that Goering would have had.
I totally agree. I mean, like I said, the film isn't bad. But it's not necessarily good.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. Yeah.
It's just it's very television-esque of the 2000s, meaning passable.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brian Cox is the highlight of the film. Brian Cox is the reason 100%. I finished the film. I don't know how many nominations there were for acting. I think Spencer Tracy got a nomination. Burt Lancaster. Can we actually fact check this, Rory? Could you go on Google right now while we're talking and check the number of nominations? And just tell me nominations for acting.
Maximilian Schell won Best Leading Actor.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer Tracy got nominated for Best Leading Actor.
Yeah.
Montgomery Clift got nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role.
So let's pause there.
Yeah.
Montgomery Clift got nominated for an Oscar for playing 8 minutes in a movie.
Yeah. It's pretty mad, isn't
I'm
it?
just saying.
There you have it.
There you have it. Keep going.
Yeah. Judy Garland got nominated for Supporting.
4 acting nominations for one movie.
Yeah.
That, my friend, is what you call an actor's director. That, my friend, is what you call a director who knows how to get the best out of his or her actor. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. I think that I've made my case.
So you prefer Judgment at Nuremberg over Nuremberg? Sorry.
I guess as closing statements, this film is beautiful because what it's saying is you have no idea how powerful the individual is. Yeah. And we all have it in us to not only create a better tomorrow, but even just a better future for ourselves. It's actually a case to be made to even help you through depression. If you're going through it, just know you're incredibly powerful and you have the strength to topple the world. And you may laugh now, but if you just look at history, Napoleon was 5'2".
Oh, fuck.
Good night.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.